Episode 41 of Politically Conscious is here today at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Trump vows to send troops into Chicago, but the mayor and the Illinois governor aren't having it. At the same time, the CDC pushes back against HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy's sweeping vaccine policy changes and firings. Should America be concerned about Kennedy's vision for public health? Our political experts break it all down. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. What's up, everybody? It's your mental activist, Montoya Smith. I am the host of Politically Conscious. This is episode 41. I got my brother Emil Bryant, expert political consultant in this thing, coming from the left of things. We're still looking for our brother Leo Smith coming from the right, so hopefully we'll get him on. Everything's okay with him. But if you will, go ahead and introduce yourself while we wait for our brother, and we'll give people the context of this show. If they've never been a part of Politically Conscious, we try to bring you some consciousness to politics, as difficult as that may be. Go ahead, brother.
I am a political consultant. I've advised candidates for Congress, both Senate and representative. I've also been helping local candidates, business owners. I'm a life coach, business coach, author, and I help people tell the truth. Every time I talk to a candidate or an aspiring candidate, I want them to know that the truth shall set them free and set the people free. The truth, first and foremost. Bad news never gets better with time. Tell the truth, tell it often, tell it early. Let's go.
And that's what we're here to wade through the propaganda. Just found out Brother Leo will be with us here in a couple of minutes. And so if you're first time watching Politically Conscious, we basically share what's going on with politics by sharing clips. And I'll get both of our expert opinions, again, Emil from the left, and as soon as our brother Leo comes from the right perspective. And hopefully between the two of them, we can kind of wade through what's real and what's not. But that is always our effort. We can't always get it right, but we definitely attempt to do that. And I would offer, Emil, while we wait for Leo, that's a little different currently based on the environment that we're in with these phones in our hands and the ability to, in a sense, receive news at all times. But unfortunately, often we're receiving that news in a silo. And something I pointed out with today's issue as we continue to talk about the potential of Trump sending troops, as we see Chicago, Brandon Johnson actually rejected that. But that was our conversation last week. So we're almost part two of that conversation. But I'll say in this, in my watching the media, because I do this show, when I watch, let's say, Fox versus NBC, I can really understand why people come to the conclusions they come to, because the information is offered so slanted. Oh,
100%. So, Montoya, let's be real. You and I started this podcast after a conversation, and the one thing we said was we didn't want to be swayed by dollars. So we still do not have a sponsor for that very reason, because dollars means influence. And whether you're CNN, MSNBC, Fox, One American News Network, it doesn't matter. You are a slave to the dollar. So when you want something when you need something less, more independent, you should look for who's got the least amount of influence. And right now, this show is one of the few that can say you get it soup to nuts, start to finish, and there's nobody behind us paying us. We're doing this on our dime.
Let me say this, though, with y'all help, for you watchers help, you can go to mentaldialogue.com and make sure we continue to do it independently and without the need of sponsors. So in that sense, you're right. On our effort and your support as the watchers. Do want to make that clear. We can always support us as well. But let's go ahead and get this thing started. Hopefully our brother Leo will be on there, and he'll
be here shortly, I'm sure. He just said he would.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, hopefully we'll get him on. But let's go ahead and get the show started. So this is our first clip, again, kind of part two of last week. This is actually talking about what's happening in DC, because that's kind of how we ended last week's show. So I wanted to start with that before we got into the Chicago stuff.
We begin tonight with President Trump's latest efforts to take over law enforcement in D.C. 700 National Guard troops will arrive in the district in the coming days. They're being deployed from West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio at President Trump's request. Thanks for joining us for News 4 at 6. I'm Un Yang. The number of troops on the ground in the district will nearly double to a total of 1,500 National Guardsmen patrolling the streets of D.C. News 4's Amy Cho has reaction from residents.
We know the number of National Guard troops on the ground here in D.C. will nearly double in the coming days. This comes as the organization Free D.C. has been putting up flyers like this one in Columbia Heights, telling people they have the right to film the police and giving them advice on what to do if they are stopped. This weekend, the governor of South Carolina pledged to send 200 National Guard troops to the district, West Virginia 300 to 400 troops, and Ohio 150 troops. Some district residents tell News 4 they are not happy.
I don't want our city to become a police state. I just think it's wrong.
We should be focusing on protecting people who need protecting, and I feel like we should be using this energy towards something else that will be more impactful.
This morning, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut appeared on Meet the Press, criticizing the Trump administration's takeover of D.C. police.
What's happening here in Washington, D.C. is just a stunt. Donald Trump didn't like the fact that the walls were closing in on him, that his own base was questioning why he wouldn't release the Epstein files.
Meantime, U.S. Attorney for D.C. Janine Pirro telling Fox News district residents should be grateful.
They want to march and protest. You know what? They should kiss the ground at this point, that you've got someone who wants to make the city safe again, who wants to make it clean again.
And some district residents say they agree.
I think it's a good thing because, you know what I'm saying, it's better for the community and safer for the kids. Stop the violence, you know what I'm saying, hugs, not slugs.
And NBC News has learned this weekend some National Guard troops here in the district will be armed. And this is a change in policy from just a few days ago when the Army had said its National Guard members here in the district would not be carrying weapons. Amy Cho, News 4.
So got our brother Leo with us as well. Thank you, Leo, for joining us. We're gonna jump right in as we start reacting to these clips. I know you caught the tail end of it, Leo. But what we're doing, we want to kind of go back to the DC to kind of set the context for what's going on in Chicago, because Emil alluded two shows prior to that you thought what happened in DC would possibly move beyond DC, and that attempt is happening. But let's talk about what's happening in DC, because I have offered and continue to offer, thanks to one of our watchers, Brent House. He's always highlighted that even us having the dialogue about the crime specifically in DC or any other city, he considers it a red herring, because I agree, because I think the bigger play that you've alluded to, Emil, is really what's going on. But we can kind of get bogged down in the weeds. And as you see, well, I'll say the weeds based on my perspective. But as you see with that clip, I thought it was a very fair clip, because you had people saying, hey, we think it's a police takeover. But you also had some residents saying, hey, this is actually safer for the kids. So again, in that dialogue, I think you can have a robust dialogue, but is it the play? But Emil, I'll kind of let you jump in on that clip. And Leo, you can kind of catch up on that clip as well.
I think that clip was relatively even-handed, but I think it's also part of the propaganda. And the problem is, like, if you go into the news, the House, Speaker Johnson will not support a renewal of the 30-day takeover rule. So the president had 30 days after he declared an emergency to do something, and then the House has to extend that. The House has not chosen to extend that. On the other side, Mayor Bowser has said, yes, I will continue to coordinate with the federal officials. And so you have the House that won't extend the emergency act or the emergency powers. The Senate Democrats have said they'll filibuster any bill that comes to them about DC. And then you have the residents who are split, but they're not split 50-50 like that clip would show. If you look at some of the polling, it's much more like 70-30. And the problem is that beyond all of this, the precedent is set that the president of the United States can use the National Guard, which he did in LA. So I want to make it clear that what he did in LA was a non-federal district. DC is a federal district. LA is its own city, its own municipality. And he put those troops in without the governor's consent. So there is precedent, and DC is a mega demonstration of what can happen when the president uses force in his own vision, without regard to the people, without regard to the city government, without regard to the Constitution. So now we have in federal court, there's a violation of posse comitatus that's being rolling through the courts that the administration said they would fight. And for those who don't know, posse comitatus says that federal troops cannot be used for law enforcement domestically. So all of this is coming to a head, but it's coming to a head in front of people who want to feel safe. And for some, that means letting the city government do its thing. And for others, it means letting the president do his thing. But the bottom line is that we're in a place where the news is going to show you both sides, but I don't think both sides are necessarily accurate 50-50.
Fair enough. Leo, let's check. We can't see your video, but sometimes we can catch your audio. So I want to see if we could hear you, Leo.
Yeah, give me, yeah, my video seems to be gone, but can you hear me?
Yep, you can hear you well. So yep, go ahead.
No, I mean, look,
get your response.
I just think that this is an exercise in futility to over debate the real issue. We're talking about procedural allowances when, in fact, I think that there is nothing that we can do about what Trump is doing in D.C. To support the idea, even if you think it's a false idea, that he is there to reduce crime. Even if you disagree with it, he's allowed to do what he's doing. And I think from a procedural process, we have to choose the battles we can win and the battles that we can't. So I'm very interested in the bigger conversation and that is Emil and Montoya, what procedural rights do states have against such a decision from the authoritarian posture that the president is taking? And then why does it matter? I mean, in other words, do we care about crime or not? And I know there's a lot of debate, but it's kind of a partisan debate, it seems to me to be, except for is a partisan debate on to whether or not this kind of effort is needed, this kind of intervention is needed, and whether it's effective. But what's funny about it, it's not so partisan when you actually go into the actual communities that these people who are victims of these crimes are living in.
So I would agree with that, what you just said, that it's not as partisan inside of those communities. I will agree with that. I think there's a cut that's going to talk more about it here a little later, so I'll table that. And let's go into the bigger conversation. And Chicago has become the biggest conversation because, again, we do call out our brother Shelley because Emil and him got into it on the thing. He was like, he's going to go somewhere else. And like kind of similar to yourself, Leo, based on what what's written in the Constitution, if you will, Shelley was like, no, he can't. He's just as simple as that to him. He can't based on the rules. But we're seeing that fight. And this is what the Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson recently had to say.
The city of Chicago will resist a potential military deployment by U.S. President Donald Trump.
We have not called for this. Our people have not asked for this.
On Saturday, Mayor Brandon Johnson signed an executive order asking law enforcement to not cooperate with officials in case of a deployment. It also demands federal agents stand down from any attempts.
We will not have our police officers, who are working hard every single day to drive down crime, deputized to do traffic stops and checkpoints for the president. Protecting Chicago will ensure that every Chicagoan knows their rights, that every single family is prepared, and every part of city government is directed to protect the people of Chicago from federal action.
On Saturday, Trump lashed out at the Illinois governor for opposing the move. Trump already assigned nearly 2,000 troops to Washington, D.C., and is now threatening to extend his crackdown to more Democratic-led cities, including Chicago.
We have received credible reports that we have days, not weeks, before our city sees some type of militarized activity by the federal government. It is unclear at this time what that will look like exactly. We may see militarized immigration enforcement. We may also see National Guard troops. We may even see active duty military and armed vehicles in our streets. We will protect our Constitution, we will protect our city, and we will protect our people. We do not want to see tanks in our streets. We do not want to see families ripped apart. We do not want grandmothers thrown into the back of unmarked vans. We don't want to see homeless Chicagoans harassed or disappeared by federal agents.
So I think this now is headed directly to the issue, right? The bigger conversation when you have a mayor of the city saying, "Hey, I'm offering my executive order," right? Obviously, Trump made a lot of news with the executive orders he offered at the beginning of his administration, but he said, "I'm offering my executive order," and so we're coming to head when you have a city mayor saying, "We're going to fight against this procedure because we're not asking for this." So this brings us into the bigger conversation that you were talking about, Leo. I'll let you respond first. Again, that's just Brandon Mayer saying, "Hey, here's how far we are willing to go to not agree with if he actually decides to send in troops." There was a recent cut where he seemed to back off a little bit, but I think it's due to this backlash from, in my opinion, from the mayor and the Illinois governor, even though he called the Illinois governor crazy for not accepting the troops. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, I mean, Mayor Johnson is in between a rock and a hard place because all this posturing and the way that he's presenting sort of an opposition to bringing the federal troops, it benefits Pritzker, his governor, who wants to run for president. Then it more than it benefits the citizens in Chicago, more than it benefits Mayor Johnson as being looked upon as an authoritative leader on the issue of crime and crime prevention for on behalf of the citizens. Mayor Johnson is basically looking like someone who is the lapdog of Pritzker. He's looking like he's yielding sensibility for Pritzker's, national hopes. And so, I hate to say it, but the brother looks like he's working for this governor without interest in protecting his people.
Emil, your thoughts on what you see?
I want to disagree with Leo, brother. I appreciate your perspective, but I don't agree with it. And the reason why, I think you said it right when you said he's between a rock and a hard place. After that, yes, there's a ton of political posturing, and there always will be. But let's start with the fact that the political posturing starts with the president, who, by even threatening this, is violating the Constitution. Federal troops should not be used for law enforcement, period. Have a nice day. Everything after that, rock in a hard place, political posturing is an outgrowth of that unconstitutional decision. And we cannot stop and say, well, the politics or the optics, when there's in fact a problem. The problem is you have a president who is going around Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, which clearly states federal troops will not be used for law enforcement. After that, we can talk about what the response should look like, but let's always start with the brass tacks. And the brass tacks here is that Governor Pritzker and Mayor Johnson have both been very clear. We did not ask for these troops. We do not want them. And it doesn't matter what you say. We're doing our jobs to control crime the best we can. We don't need your help. And to reject that doesn't show bad optics. It doesn't show bad faith to the citizens. What it shows is fealty to the Constitution. We have to stay loyal to that first. If they ask for help, by all means, they should get it. But what other cities outside of Chicago, Baltimore, and the others, LA, have crime problems just as bad or worse than Chicago that are not even being considered for federal troops? We can talk about all of that, but we're not going to talk about it because it's a violation of the Constitution, and we got to start there.
Well, let the Supreme Court decide when the Constitution's been violated. And I think that we still do have a fair Supreme Court. Look, the fact is all these things can be adjudicated. And while they're being adjudicated and argued, there are people who are suffering from drive-bys. There are people who are being mugged. These things are truly happening. And I really have, take issue with how we define we. I really caution, especially Black Americans, to not fall into this thing where the elite, the elites like a Brandon Johnson, like you and me, that we get to define through our own personal experience what is happening to them and people on the ground. We're quickly evolving into this country where when things don't touch us, those of us who have had the privilege of greater education and greater economic freedom, et cetera, are ignoring the conditions that people are living in on the streets or in marginalized, economically marginalized communities that don't receive the support. I think every voice matters, okay? And so when we say we, and Brandon Johnson thinks it's not a problem, well, we're not interested in his policy solutions as much as we're interested in getting some order in the chaos.
So let me jump in and call out complete BS on what you just said, brother. I'm gonna call complete. I'm talking about utter BS. Because I am a man, although I am educated and although I'm doing okay for myself personally, everything I do, every conversation I have with bringing the police to our people to say, hey, here's how you handle stops. I stay with the people with what I do. And I'm going to tell you firsthand from just visiting my mom in one of those small podunk towns from where I'm from, who won't leave even though I beg her to. I live it out every day. And what happens, Brother Shelley Winters on this show highlighted, he says, crime is a perspective. Am I quoting him right, Emil? I think that's what he said on the show. Something is what do you say? I want to get this right so I can make this point. Emil, you remember a couple weeks on the show where he said,
yeah, I do remember. And you had it. It was a almost like an individual perspective that he was trying to present.
Right. He said, yeah, crime is a perspective. Relative. No, he said, I got his quote wrong. But my point is this. The reason I call BS on it, Leo, is because in my entire life, I've watched the political narratives debate what crime looks like, and it ain't been my reality. And when I say it ain't been my reality, I'm talking about when it was at its height and the communities themselves were saying, hey, can we get help in these communities? So I've been through that period. I know exactly what that period looks like, being a part of saying, hey, can we get some relief here? But I've been part of times when ramping up the troops, because it was done very intentionally in the 90s. I lived that out and know exactly what that's like. And I'm sitting here watching politics every day debate something, and they don't know nothing they're talking about. And here's the clip. Here's the clip that shares it more than anything. I'm just gonna go to the clip instead of me going on a rant here. This clip comes from. Are y'all both familiar with Father Fledgler? I may be saying his name incorrectly. Father Fledgler in Chicago. Are y'all both familiar with him?
I am now. Yeah,
I am.
Okay. There's nobody that's done more in Chicago than that man in reference to taking care of what's happening to the youth. He started the basketball leagues that slowed the crime down from 12 to 4 a.m. in Chicago. The reason I know about it, because I'm not in Chicago. I'm not in the streets of Chicago. I'm not claiming that. But this is how close I've been to this issue and been keeping up with it for that many years. I remember when they stopped the basketball league against his request, just based on a curfew was more important. The curfew was more important. What happened with the curfew? More crime happened when they got rid of the basketball league. I'm talking about reality versus political stuff. The political stuff said a curfew is going to be affected. The basketball was affected. This guy put it in and got it back in again after they realized he was right about what actually works versus what we talk about in politics. I've never respected neither side when it comes to politics based on being somebody that's in there. So this is what he had to say to President Trump himself, the man that's done the most in Chicago. Let me play that clip. I'm passionate about it because I don't like political narratives when it comes to what's happening on the streets.
And I was watching, Joe Scarborough was questioning Mayor Brandon Johnson this morning, and he was like, well, Mayor, I agree with you on the social services, but wouldn't 5,000 new police help? Well, first of all, let's be real clear. And what's happening today in Chicago, even I was just literally just reading the piece that I wrote 11 years ago. What's happening in Chicago today, that's not what was happening 11 years ago.
Right.
And see, that's the thing. These Republicans, they throw out. I remember when I kicked Philip from Indiana's butt, and I was like, dude, you never even been to Chicago. They use Chicago as the punching bag whenever they need to try to make their point about, oh, my God, how bad crime is.
Exactly, and it's a good point. And I'm certainly not going to sit here and say we have Wakanda, but the truth of the matter is, violent crime is down, and homicides are down, and shootings are down. We've done some things together that have worked. We got a good police chief now. We in the 6th district here, we have worked so hard building a relationship between police and citizens and young people, and conversations out. We see what's working. We see what's working in intervention in the street. So the craziness is we see things that are working and seeing crime coming down, and he cuts off the money that helps those things continue, and then wants to send in National Guard to the very thing we're saying is never going to work, militarization. So you spend thousands and millions of dollars and send National Guard in to Band-Aid for 2 months and have them in every corner, making people live in fear and chaos. And also, I think some young people are not going to react to that and say, no, not here, not on my block, and there's going to be some confrontation, which is what I think he wants. I think he wants to provoke violence in Chicago, because what he really has...
Oh, he does? Oh.
That's what he wants.
Yes. Yeah, I recorded... a podcast today here in Atlanta with Pastor Jamal Bryant, and it's literally what I said. I said, Donald Trump, he desperately wants people to react. And what I said to Pastor Bryant is that what has to happen, there has to be a non-violent reaction to it. Because yeah, Trump is itching for what they call unrest. In fact, if anybody looks at those orders of the Department of Defense, that's what he was focused on, the issue of civil unrest. He wants to cancel the election citing civil unrest. And so if people are going to respond, it has to be a non...
Don't tell me you care about crime when the people that do the work say this is what works, this is what doesn't work, and you cut the money on the things that work. So there is no elite people, Leo, talking about people in the streets want something. Here's how it works.
Montoya, there are elite people like us changing the whole story. The story is about crime, and you guys are now like there's all this debate about what works. Notice that the Republicans and conservatives are not arguing whether or not those things work. They're not even engaging in the argument with you. You know why? Because the progressives who are talking about all these great programs, which I believe in many of them too. Okay, I believe in midnight basketball and employing people and that kind of stuff. Look, the fact is that there was no national Democratic Party led campaign on those issues until somebody did something direct on the crime. That's when you started talking. You still don't know what.
Why do you say that when we actually that disregards the work that got it to where it's at now?
Right. No. The whole point is you got to get there somehow.
You just found out the work was being done.
Right.
You just found out.
You know, look, I've been hosting things from College Park to North Georgia on policing and communities for ages. I've had a client that I got appointed to Barack Obama's 24th Century Policing Committee. I think you might even attended one thing that I did downtown College Park. Montoya, look, I am very much engaged with this issue. I lived in a community myself growing up that I heard gunshots all night long in my neighborhood that I grew up in. So this issue is very personal to me. What I'm saying to you is the DNC, or even the Congressional Black Caucus, but particularly the Democrats' national platform, has not engaged with a think tank policy, evidence-based big campaign, okay, about what cities are doing to reduce crime and showing the results in a way that meant something from the grandmother. Because if they were doing it, I couldn't have won a campaign for a white Republican in Savannah. I ran that campaign in 2014 and won on crime on one issue.
Leo, you're talking like nobody, like when they say when Roland Martin's on that video with Father Fledgler, the man who's on the streets more than anybody, when he says, when I wrote that thing 11 years ago, that's not what's happening today. You're talking about a moment when, again, what I'm saying today, I couldn't have said 10 years. I couldn't have said 15 years ago. I couldn't have said what I'm saying today.
Look. There needs to be applause and duplication where appropriate of the work that Father Pfleger's doing. Okay, there's work that Andre Dickens did here, or Kasim Reed did here, that needs to be duplicated in Georgia. I mean, okay, so look, no one's denying that work is effective and needs to be argued for, but at the same time, there's a bunch of conversation as to whether or not putting troops on the ground is reducing crime. And I think it's time to say, okay, we need help reducing crime. We need hooks, jabs.
Where does that come from, though? What data do you use to support that?
Yeah.
This is the problem.
When Chicago specifically had 3,000 more policemen they have now, their murder rate was at its height. Like you're just like here it is. And this is not the DNC responding, not having a national response. This is America to the T. America to the T is if I want to rile up a base, say I want to be tough on crime. Democrats have done it, Republicans are doing it. And in this specific situation, you started out, Leo, saying, I think the conversation should be about what the political constitutional stuff is. So this conversation is because our president started saying crime is super high while it's at a 30-year low. That's the actual fact. Because the bigger play is what he wants to do in the future. And here we are. You took it back down to the conversation you said we shouldn't have. You said the conversation on this video, we should not have a conversation about that. We should be talking about the constitutional stuff. So we got a president using an age-old trick. Let me get tough on crime. Get us in that debate while trying to make the bigger play. I thought the conversation was going to be about the bigger play.
Well, what is the bigger play?
Montoya? We got to start looking at the long-term effect of using national emergencies to enact policies that go around Congress or go around the Constitution. And the bottom line is that you cannot declare a national emergency, which is what happened in Washington, D.C., without an actual emergency with some data to support it. What is a national emergency? Anything could be from a terrorist attack or a hurricane or anything in between. But what it's not is a supposition that is not supported by data that crime is at an all-time high when in fact it is going down significantly. And if you bring anecdotes into it, yes, Leo, there's always going to be a victim of crime that's going to tell you they need more protection. I do not hate them for asking for more protection. That hurts my heart too. But the bottom line is we don't make policy on anecdotes.
Let me ask you guys something. Where's the evidence that in Washington, D.C., the federal troops have not reduced murder rates? Where's the evidence? Because I want to know where you're sourcing that.
Leo, I said in another show, you're going to see a short-term reduction in crime. That short-term reduction in crime is happening now. I also said over the long term, which is 6 months or more, you will probably begin to see crime tick back up. We haven't gotten past the short term. So you can have your argument about the short term and you're right, but you're not right based on data that the long-term reduction in crime will maintain.
And don't limit it to that. Don't limit it to that. One more thing. I'll let you talk. One more thing. No, don't leave out that now that this is the play. We're going to go to the thing that works the least, that works in the short term, but we're going to go to the thing that works the least. And what are these cities saying? Give us the money back to continue the programs that has got us to the 30-year low.
Sure. People are always going to ask for money. Look, I appreciate the fact that
while it's working.
I appreciate the fact that you're acknowledging that it is working in the short term. Okay, so that is a place where we can agree that it's evidence-based right there. But when I ask you to show me the data that is not working, I'm glad that you pivoted back to, well, actually it is working.
No, I didn't pivot. I said you cannot. I cannot give you data.
We can show you plenty of data about on the long term it hasn't worked. We got plenty of data. So yes, don't flip that. I got plenty of data. I just gave you three. When Chicago had 3,000 more policemen, it was not the murder rate was at its highest. So how does we got consistent long-term data?
Had more police when their murder rate was highest.
Why do you have
Chicago, Baltimore? All of them.
How do you have
President
a
Clinton's,
Legler himself
community
saying
policing-
this is not going to work? How do you have the people on the street that do the work saying, you're going back to literally, you're sending the political narrative is, oh, crime is still high. It's at a 30-year low. Why are you going to go in while somebody's helping and take away the things that they're using to work? Like, why are you taking away the things that work?
I'm speaking to the heart. I'm speaking to the heart of a person, like someone who might be suffering from cancer. When they go into the doctor and the doctor says, hey, your cancer is 30% reduced, 30-year low in your cancer, a 30-day low in your cancer.
You're making
Look, that's not good enough for the patient. Okay.
Nobody would ever. That analogy would never work on a cancer. That don't even logically make any sense.
So in other words, it does make sense, Montoya, because the idea is that while 30% reduction, if you've got 100 murders happening, in a summer, and someone has a 30% reduction, how many is that? How many murders?
You're using anecdotal.
Okay?
You're using anecdotal.
No, I'm
data
using common sense. I'm using common sense.
Is when you say how did you get it down 30%? If you say how did you get it down 30%, and you say, hey, here's what I use, and you come in and say, well, no longer use that. I'm going to give you more troops.
No, I'm going to say use that and more. That's what I'm going to say.
But the and more has not worked long term ever. We got plenty of. I'll send you the data after the show. I'll show you.
Why do we ask for ceasefires and military intervention sometimes? Because we want a pause so we can actually look at all the solutions together and have a time where we can openly discuss the positive solutions. I fear, gentlemen, that we are moving into hyper-partisan defensive positions rather than having an offensive position when it comes to leadership on the issues of crime. We should be asserting more than we are defending.
If that was true, Leo, then every city in America should be demanding National Guard troops. Why aren't they? Why aren't every single city in this country? Because it doesn't work. And they know that, and we know that. The point is that you're trying to add force to something that doesn't have any data to support that force. And that is one of the challenges.
You keep saying that, but Marion Bowser, the mayor,
anecdote that doesn't cross over into policy. I agree.
You guys got to. We got to have some kind of agreement whether or not Marion Bowser said that it is working. Is she lying?
Again, we have a short-term data set
and
not a long-term data set. So until we have a long-term data set, we
so
can't
disregard.
Really
so are you saying disregard the long? So are you admitting you're saying disregard the long term?
I'm not saying disregard it. I'm saying acknowledge. I'm saying
it gladly said what Emil said what was going to happen.
Hey, Montoya, you asked me a question. Let me answer. Okay. Am I saying to disregard the long term? Not at all. What I'm saying is that acknowledge the short term. Don't lie about it. Acknowledge that the short term is working. Okay, because what that does is shows that you are true to in your concern about the issue, and then start saying, yes, we need more attention.
Either one of us have not. Don't say don't lie about it or not acknowledge it, because you've not watched us one time. You're talking to somebody else. You're not talking to the two people on the show.
I'm talking in general. No, I'm not just saying that you guys. I'm talking about the general narrative on the progressive left side is that it doesn't work
between us right now. And so you got two people who absolutely acknowledge it. So what's your response to the two people that acknowledge it?
No, I think it's great. I mean, you guys are not typical. Okay. When someone says, hold up your right pinky, you guys are actually the people, the 1% who actually does it and does it properly, That's so, y'all are not normal. I'm just going to tell you that. Okay. And look, society knows that y'all are not normal. And therefore, this argument isn't about what you guys understand. It's really about whether or not people are demanding the type of solutions that are countervailing to the political narratives. I'm here for solutions. I'm here for rationale. And rationale says use something that gives a temporary reduction. Give something.
I'm not here to violate the Constitution in order to reduce crime in the way that it's been done. Again, we have solutions that are working. If you go, I'll use your cancer argument for a minute. If I have cancer and my doctor says, hey, this 30-day treatment has resulted in a 30% reduction, guess what I'm going to say? Keep doing it. Give me more. Make sure it continues. What I'm not going to say is, hey, doc, cut my money, cut my funding, cut my treatment so that it can perhaps go back. I want my doctor to prescribe what works. And if it's working, I don't want it to stop. But what we have is a president who's taken a prescription that works. He's cutting the funding to that, and he's added something that we know doesn't work over the long term. And you're saying, let's focus on the short term. And no one on this show has disagreed with you that the short term is working. The problem is the handoff between long term and short term is where the violence ticks up. And what we don't want is for that violence to tick up. The other thing that I've said consistently is that you don't violate the Constitution to do it. And the problem that Montoya has said, that I've said, and I'll say it very clearly now, is that all of these crime conversations almost always hinge upon Black and brown bodies being the subject of over-policing. And tough on crime doesn't mean tough on Appalachia or tough on others. It means tough on Black people. And the problem we have is that the people who are most affected by over-policing, by the people who are Chicago torture squads, for over 20 years, there was a Chicago torture squad that coerced confessions out of people. That was over policing. And the threat from over policing is real when you add thousands of National Guard troops to Washington, D.C., or L.A., or Chicago, or Baltimore. And I'm not here for any of that. And when you arm them specifically because you want them armed, you are inviting more trouble. And the chaos that comes from that is what he's trying to trigger so that he can do other things in other cities that don't make sense unless there's true violence. I'm not here for that. I'm here for long-term, data-driven decisions that affect policy. I hate the anecdotes, grandmothers, mothers, and aunties, and sisters, and brothers who are affected by crime. I hate them, but I'm not going to use them as a lever to allow someone to violate the Constitution, which makes all of us victims of something none of us want.
And Emil, one thing to your analogy, you would say, give me more of this short-term treatment. But if that doctor said, well, in the long term, this is risky.
That part. I'm
and that's what, Leo, you're leaving out.
There's a gentleman that said, give me liberty or give me death. I can afford to pursue liberty, okay? I have achieved and had choices available to me that allows me to live in liberty without death. Some people don't have those choices. And what we're missing is there's a lot of people, and there's polling available from Pew Research polls to Gallup polls, that suggests that many Americans in this time of chaos are choosing to have authoritarian leadership, meaning they're willing to give up some of their liberty to avoid death, All I'm saying is, let's not ignore what those people are saying. Let's not ignore the fact that there are people living in chaos and turmoil who are so desperate that they're willing to take on authoritarianism. And that is a problem. I don't like authoritarianism. I like liberty. Okay. And we are risking, I agree with you, Emil, we are risking our liberty and freedom for the sake of being manipulated, yes, politically. But at the same time, there is a demand for good governance, for forthright leadership, for being able to create the think tanks that can create our 2025 plan, a pro-justice, pro-people project 2025. All I'm doing, as I've consistently done, is saying that we can do better. And when I say we, I'm not talking about white people or I'm saying where you have control and influence, assert that regardless of what white people are doing or what the president is doing. I believe in the local lab, and I'm going to continue to fight and encourage local leadership to do everything they can to keep somebody from coming into your house and saying that you aren't doing it.
Yep. And I think,
agree.
And I've been saying, like I said, it wouldn't be covered in the media. I've spent 2 months applauding the Chicago mayor, the Baltimore mayor, the brother down in Montgomery, because they have been doing exactly what you're saying. And I'm saying if we're tired of the propaganda, and that's who we are, then we should be able to highlight when you got people getting it right. And so to me, the Chicago mayor is not a lackey of the government, of the governor. when they actually have been getting it right. And you have a Father Frederick who's been doing it way longer than the mayor ever has, even though Brandon Johnson is of the elite. That's fair enough. I get it. He's in a political class, but Father Frederick has been doing this for longer than any of us have been doing, and actually in the streets doing the work. And when they're doing the work, you have to give them credit. Like I said, the city was wrong when they put the curfew on versus his court. They end up losing to the actual guy in the streets. That's what happened in Chicago. That's never been covered nationally. Let's be fair to our listeners. Have been going at it, y'all. I got to be fair to them. So let's run through them.
The viewers are in on the comments.
I got so passionate, I didn't even get to y'all. So
I love the comments there.
So here's a good one right here. We got Leo says, "Are we seriously talking about benefit for re-election when the rights of democratic cities and people are being trashed? Or are we not U.S. citizens?" It says, "Leo, stop the noise, tell the truth." Let me go to another one. I got Leslie says, hold on, I have a little trouble here. Give me a second. We're going to run through a lot of these. Leslie Taverner says, "I love when you call out BS, Montoya." I got 5F saying, "Leo," let me pull it up. "Leo, the Supreme Court is stacked in his favor. Are you kidding? Black and white Americans are outraged by the actions to ignore our constitutions. Are you kidding me, Leo? This is totally BS." We got another one that says, give me a second. Let me pull it up. This is a new person watching. Meta Brahman. It only
that's somebody I invited. Hey, Matea, thank you for joining us. Really good to see you here.
Say crime is actually down in most cities, nowhere near the emergency that Trump is pretending to exist. And I'm offering that he's pretending to exist because of the bigger play. Like, this is such a common play for either side to say, let's be tough on crime and get response to their actual constituents. All right, let's see if we got any more comments. I got another person that says, quoting Bible verses. Let's go. I got one more I'm jumping around, y'all. I'm not doing all of them. "Thanks for sharing the footage from Roland Martin. Unfortunately, the truth on podcasts like this one, Damn and Lemon, are on point." Says, "Leo, you are black. You can't be engaged. Take the data 10 years to now." I will say the last 10 years is evident data of what works, in my opinion. I will agree with that part. All right, we got one more person, then we'll get back to the clips. Oh, somebody just says watching. Let me see. Okay, I got one from Brent House. He says, "Brookings Institute, Dr. Rashawn Ray, think tank focused on what works in communities." So I think you brought up the think tanks. Thank you. All right, I'm just running through a lot of them, y'all. Let's see if I see anybody new. All right, y'all, let's get back to our clips. We only got about 10 more minutes, so let's keep it rolling. Oh, I wanted to, matter of fact, let's transition to the other topic I want to talk about today. RFK, you know, I'm not a big fan of him. I always make that very well known on this show. He just got pulled in front of the CDC, and let's take a look at some of the stuff he went through.
Senator, they deserve the truth, and that's what we're going to give them for the first time in the history of that agency.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for your attention. In June, you fired every member of the well-qualified panel that was charged with recommending vaccines to the CDC. No one in your job has ever fired every committee member all at once. That month, you told the American people that you were, quote, going to bring great people onto the ACIP panel, not anti-vaxxers. Are you aware that another one of these new members, Dr. Levy, wrote that, quote, evidence is mounting and indisputable that mRNA vaccines cause serious harm, including death, especially among young people? Yes or no? Are you aware that he said that?
I wasn't aware he said it, but I think I agree with it.
You agree with it? It's not true.
And I applaud you for joining the president in a call for radical transparency. Thank you for that. I said yesterday, I believe it, that President Trump deserves a Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed. If he had been President Obama, he would have gotten it. But because of Operation Warp Speed, forcing the federal government to come to a vaccine development within 10 months when others said it couldn't be done, we saved millions of lives globally, trillions of dollars. We reopened economies, an incredible accomplishment. Mr. Secretary, do you agree with me that the president that the president deserves a Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed?
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. That was phenomenal.
Let me ask you, but you just told Senator Bennett that the COVID vaccine killed more people than COVID.
Wait,
that was a statement.
I did not say that.
Okay, then let me ask, because you also
Senator, I just want to make clear, I did not say that.
We'll check the record. That's a question of fact.
Let's clear this up right now, Secretary Kennedy. Will you tell America that all adults and all children over 6 months of age are eligible to get a COVID booster at their local pharmacy today?
Anybody can get the booster.
I'm sorry?
Anybody can get it, Senator.
Anybody. So you're saying that is now the official rule of HHS. Anybody is eligible to get a booster by just walking into the pharmacy.
It's not recommended for healthy people.
No. If you don't recommend, then the consequence of that in many states is that you can't walk into a pharmacy and get one. It means insurance companies don't have to cover the $200 or so cost.
We're not going to recommend a product for which there's no clinical data for that indication. Is that what I should be doing?
I don't see how you go over 4 weeks from a public health expert with unimpeachable scientific credentials, a longtime champion of MAHA values, caring and compassionate and brilliant microbiologist, and 4 weeks later, fire her because at least the public reports say because she refused to fire people that work for her. I do also believe that some of your statements seem to contradict what you said in the prior hearing. You said you're going to empower the scientists at HHS to do their job. I'd just like to see evidence where you've done that.
Mr. Secretary, you choose to know answers to questions with some colleagues.
So here's our qualified, our merit-based HHS secretary at work. His own organization is saying, hey, this dude is causing problems. He's firing the qualified people and bringing in people he promised not to bring in. A contradiction in itself. I could only see this happening, but the bigger question is he a danger to our public health? My clear opinion, as I've said from the beginning, is that he would be. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing, in my opinion, something unprecedented for the organization to say, hey, the head of us is not doing too well about us. That's what I call that moment. Either one of you can jump in on your thoughts.
Oh, let me just start by saying that, that guy's an absolute disaster. And, when people weren't choosing partisan sides to make the argument, and Republicans are responsible for allowing Trump to get him appointed. Look, I mean, he is a kook. Absolutely. He's not a conservative. He's never been a conservative. He's a kook. And that's a fact. He should not be in that role. And there are many Republicans, as you saw from the hearing, who agree that this was a mistake. And again, acknowledging the reality and giving those Republicans who are saying, yeah, we probably shouldn't have jumped on the Trump train for this one. This is a huge hit on American safety. And it's almost like they're saying this Marie Antoinette thing. Oh, well, wink, wink. We know he's crazy and we're going to do differently for our own children, for our own selves, even while the base is going to suffer. The regular Americans, not let them eat cake. It's sort of like, let them eat viruses, let them eat disease. I mean, this is horrible. So let me just make that clear.
Emil, your thoughts?
So, Secretary Kennedy has a problem with data, and he was called out by members of Congress with that data. But I am not a fan of the CDC, but they have done amazing work in the last 50 years. Some of what they've done has been dirty, and I will never support the things that they did that were dirty against Black and brown people, the experiments that were done in other eras. But the science that they've produced as far as the health of the American people is unimpeachable in that context. We have longer health spans than we've ever had before, minus the drug epidemic of the 90s and the drug epidemic now. We have a trend due to disease of continuing health and longevity, as well as health span, which is how long you're living a healthy life. There's a ton of data that supports what they've done to help the American people. So dismantling the CDC is, in my opinion, absolutely a danger to our health as a nation. And the thing is that the CDC is not just America. It has been doing research around the world to prevent diseases from those countries around the world that may not have robust healthcare systems or robust scientific systems to coming to America. That is a shield that we are now dismantling, which means that we are more vulnerable to things that we weren't vulnerable to before, because the CDC is now being dismantled systematically. You have enough data that you can attack the CDC's problems and still maintain the CDC's shield. You do not have to do it all because you think that the CDC is horrible for the American people. That's not true by any measure you would like to use. Have they done awful things? Yes, they have. Have they done incredible things? Yes, they have. And on balance, the things that they've done to protect America far outweigh the things they've done to hurt America. And the things that I would like to see, and when I look at all of this political machinations and all this stuff, is I want those specific programs, specific policies, and specific outcomes from the CDC that we know have been detrimental to people's health, Americans' health. I want those called out, not the people, the programs and the policies. I want those called out. I want them defunded, and I want those funds used to improve our health. But until you have that, you have this show where the HHS Secretary is firing people willy-nilly, including going back against his own word about people that he fired, when just a month prior, he was like, this is my number one, my ace. This is the person I support. You have a propaganda, a political show right now happening through HHS that is representative of this administration. And we should be more in tune with the politics than we are with the medical. And I'm not saying the medicals are not important, but I'm saying right now you're seeing propaganda played out in HHS like you are in no other. Perhaps DHS is the other where propaganda is really playing out, but even there, it's not quite as evident as it is in HHS.
Nah, good stuff. Leo, thank you for your time. Sorry for getting so passionate.
Never apologize for passion, my brother. That's what we need more of.
No, absolutely. But leave us with your last thought. I know you got to go, but thank you for your time today.
My last thought is, look, we've got a democracy if we can keep it, a republic if we can keep it. And you're not going to keep it if you don't show local evidence of good governance in this local laboratory of democracy. So folks, get engaged. We've got right here in Georgia, because of elections, because of the result of elections, that right here, Hyundai plant has been raided by ICE, and business people who are helping to make Georgia's economy stronger, to keep jobs in Georgia, from SK Battery to Hyundai down there near Savannah. The things that Kemp and us and all of us work hard to create a strong business mix in Georgia, it's actually because of an election being at risk. And I think you're going to see some Republicans who are willing to say, look, yes, on these immigration things, but it needs to be more targeted, and we need to have a judicious process as we do this work. And so be locally engaged on these issues, and look for the opportunity to make sure that we can push back against some of the Trump-led policies whenever possible. I'm saying that because my first and foremost concern is making sure that the human being comes first. So it's always great. And I hope Dems will run on some of these issues where there's overreach. And I hope Dems will, because that'll make Republicans more honest.
Thank you for your thoughts today, brother. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Peace, Leo. Always good to see you.
Yeah, I saw one comment I wanted to share before we left. Another watcher, Lenny Barnes, said, can we get back to the bigger play by Trump wanting to declare the martial law and delay the election and remain in power? And, in my own passion, again, I got caught up in the very conversation I'm saying we don't need to have, right? It's just shocking that we're leaning on the red herring versus what Lenny Barnes fairly, brother, you've called us out. Our conversation should have been about what does that look like? Let's call it what it is. And then I think I told you personally on a private conversation, maybe we can ask Shelly this if he's able to come next week. But I remember when he was overly concerned during the time we were wearing masks and having to, kind of separate from one another and not be outside during the COVID lockdowns. he was very concerned that martial law was finna be the play. I just remember saying at the time, I said, as soon as science catches up to this virus, and hoping that it would, because at the time, the scientists were like, we don't know if we're going to catch this thing, right? We don't know if we're going to catch up based on how far ahead of us it is. We just figured out what it is. And I said, if science catches up to this thing, we're going to be back outside. At the time, he was adamant. No, we're just giving ourselves over to martial law. Martial law is going to remain because that's what they're really doing. That was his thoughts about, the COVID lockdown. And now we're back outside. And then we get the president saying, hey, let's go into these cities and stop crime. And he said on the show, I'm all for extreme measures. The very things he thought was going to happen at COVID, he was adamantly against it and thought I was being foolish, saying, no, when science catches up, we'll be back outside. He thought I was foolish. He said, hey, martial law is going to lock us down. And now he's welcoming martial law because somehow he thinks that his anger of one death is somehow more important than the actual people on the ground doing the work, who are also saying we don't want this.
Look, there's a ton of things happening at once, and thank you, Lenny, for tuning in and for your comment, because part of the challenge that we're facing here is that this president is using every means at his disposal to try to coerce Americans into believing authoritarianism is okay. He's using immigration. He's using now crime, and he'll use something else because we just had a boat in the Caribbean destroyed by military action for it being a suspected drug runner, right? Normally they're interdicted. Normally they're stopped and search and seize if necessary. They just went out and just destroyed it. That is coming home. Very clearly, we're seeing these kinds of things happen where there's just more and more testing by this administration to see what can they get away with. And the problem is they're using all of the things that scare us to hide them. So we have to be vigilant, which is why you always hear me, Montoya, talk about the Constitution. When I say posse comitatus, I'm talking about the play. This is what Lenny's talking about. How does he hide behind something that he can use to advance an authoritarian agenda? He just took a 10% stake in Intel. That's socialism by another name when the state owns a private enterprise. And there was no crisis that Intel asked the American government for relief, and therefore the American government, like they did during 2008 with GM and AIG, where we took a stake only to secure our position in response to their request for help. This is different, which means socialism is okay when it's done by a Republican, but not when it's done by a Democrat. No, it's not. Socialism is always bad, according to all of the people who say socialism is bad. Authoritarianism is bad, whether it's a Republican president supporting protecting Black lives or not. Authoritarianism is bad. And if you do not draw the line and say that the Constitution is king, then the Constitution is not. And that means someone else is king. And right now we have evidence that there is someone trying to provoke a situation where the Constitution can be suspended or amended to support a more authoritarian or a more socialist, depending on your perspective, way of life. I'm not here for any of that. And I'll say this, and just in response to what was going on in DC, there are National Guard members. You can go to Mother Jones, where one person was clearly so upset that they spoke when they know they shouldn't, because our rules in the military are that you do not speak without authorization. Right. But so important that we're now picking up, our National Guard is picking up trash and doing all of these things to beautify the nation's capital, which are not in their charter as National Guardsmen. They signed they swore an oath to the Constitution to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and yet they're being asked to do something that is not a national emergency, that's not a local emergency, and certainly isn't a deployment to foreign lands where they will be most effective and for which they are trained. I say all of that because what we're seeing is a mask, where behind the mask, something dastardly is about to happen. And we should be at the forefront preventing all of this, because one of these goes wrong, we will see something that we've not seen in America. And that should concern every one of us. And to Lenny's point, the bigger play is, do you see him potentially suspending the Constitution, suspending elections, using whatever means necessary to stay in power, when in fact his team has said he will be here in 2028 and beyond. His team has said that. So now we should be asking ourselves, what gives them confidence that they can say Trump 2028 and make that official policy from their mouth?
And I think the answer is everything you just talked about. So if we're going to say, if you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Even myself, I shouldn't get bogged down in the conversation about whether crime is up or down when that's not the real play. So again, thank you, Lenny Barnes, for that. I'm highlighting that if we're going to beat through the propaganda, we need to be talking about what the real play is and possibly what we can do. The first thing we're telling you is, to your point, the ship example was another great example, because people could start arguing like, well, yeah, should we let them go through the process when they got drugs? Or yeah, should we just destroy it? Like, people could literally have that conversation, and that's what your point, that's what they want. They want us as the people to get caught up in whether you should destroy a drug ship or not. They want us in that conversation, because if we're in that conversation, now you get comfortable with the government saving the day. And that's exactly how you move in authoritarianism. And I don't know how I don't know how that can be challenged unless you foolishly think these conversations are the real issue. And I'm saying they're not. Even me passionately disagreeing with crime up or down is not the issue. So I'm calling myself out as well. I'll give you the last thought and we out of here, brother.
I appreciate all of our viewers today. Y'all have been so lively in the comments. It's just very thankful. But what we're doing here is trying to unpack the propaganda. We are funded by you guys. We're funded with our own pockets. We're funded by people who tune in and choose to just spend time with us. So thank you very much for all you do. We would love to see you on Mental Dialogue, mentaldialogue.com. But also, tell your friends about us and let them know that we're trying to bring something out that matters, and that is a conversation about the propaganda. So when you see us really passionate and really digging in, what we're trying to do is figure out what's the real story here. And right now, we all agree the real story is that there's the potential for America to slip down an even more slippery slope than it's on toward authoritarianism, and perhaps have a president who wants to serve a third or beyond third term. And we should be up in arms right now because of what we're doing here and your own research and background investigation to know this is not going to happen on our watch. So pay attention. And when you're worried about it, call us, let us know so we can discuss it on this show, because we want you guys to help us unpack the propaganda. And Montoya and I came up with this phrase. I'll let Montoya say it because I love it the way he says it.
If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Simple as that. Hey, thank you for a great show, brother. Hey, y'all, make sure y'all subscribe to the show and hit the notification bell, because we pop up anytime during the week if you're a first-time watcher. We're not the same day every week like some I've done with some of my other shows. I'd just like to remind people, not only subscribe, but hit the little thing to actually get the notification. That way, when we pop up, you'll get a notice and know that we went live. And of course, if you like what we did, as Mill said, please share this with other people who want to have these real conversations. All right, thanks once again. We'll see y'all next week. We'll pop up on y'all next week sometime.
Peace.